Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Andreessen,
Here.
Mr. Fell, Mr. Hopkins, Ms. McFarland,
Present.
Rose,
Here.
Ms. Sims, Ms. Yu,
Here.
and Mr. Allred.
Here. Okay, looks like we have a quorum. Any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay, we have no minutes to approve. Any communications?
There are none.
Okay, we have no continued public hearings, no old business, no new public hearings, no new business, which brings us to audience participation. Wow, we don't even have Mr. Huber here today. All right, staff report.
Just briefly, the committee of the whole kept the duplex, well, I guess now it's beyond duplex, but that section 6.3 text amendment, kept that in committee again, so we'll be returning to them here in a week and a half.
What will the date be on that? So it's not this Monday coming up. It's
It is the 5th, is
okay,
that right?
December 5th?
Yeah, December 5th.
Okay.
And that's all.
Okay. That brings us to the study session, looking at future land use descriptions in Imagine Urbana comprehensive plan draft.
Right, good evening. Okay. So yeah, just real quick, you'll recall at our last meeting, we had a very robust discussion about incremental development, infill, a little bit about annexations, and then walkability. And then so tonight we'll be getting to the topic that was on the agenda last time, but it was getting kind of late, so we pushed it to this meeting, which was nice because it gave the students who have been working on these graphics and things sometimes more time to prep some materials. So we'll be going through those tonight. And so we'll be going through the categories themselves and the materials that the students have put together for that. And then also we've got the future land use map with some annotations on it. And then I think we've got one additional map that's pretty like more substantive that will find its way into the plan. And then one that shows is the one that we talked about last time a little bit, that shows changes between the 2005 future land use and then the current draft future land use. And then we did, Andrea and I spent quite a bit of time reviewing and revising the sort of the big ideas, big moves and little moves section of the plan. So we got that out to you as well, and we can discuss that if you would like to. Okay, so to get into it, so the future land use map is, is one of the main components of the comprehensive plan. So it sort of just lays out what kind of development we want to see and where. So I know that on the screen it's kind of small. We can look at the big map if you would like to here in a bit. But I wanted to just sort of get into the descriptions themselves, and we can have a discussion. Stop me whenever you want, and we can talk about it. Just for a little bit of background, so in the current comprehensive plan, this is what our future land use descriptions look like. So we're producing something kind of similar in the new plan as well. The one difference, and this is by design, and we can discuss this, is that so in this example, there's a future land use called mixed residential, and in the current plan, it's kind of split up into different development patterns. So this is mixed residential urban pattern, and it gives a description of what type of development that urban pattern is. And then On the next page, you've got the mixed residential suburban pattern. So you got the same description for the future land use, but then it goes kind of into the form of the, of the area that it would be in as well. For our draft, we've kind of cut out that form piece. So we're just giving a description of the future land use. And we started with the 2005 future land uses. I'd say we pared them down a bit and kind of, maybe made them more focused. But that's kind of how we did it. So in the current draft, we have 7 future land use categories compared to 15 in the existing plan. That 7 is kind of with an asterisk because there's a mixed use that we've kind of separated into more intense areas and then less intense areas. So think like downtown versus like more of a neighborhood business center. Like I like to think of the area where Huaraches is at Philo and Washington, that little triangle area. That's kind of what I think of when I'm thinking of the sort of the secondary mixed use, which I'm not tied. I don't think any of us are tied to that name. So if you have suggestions for making that better, we can do that. But one thing the students have been doing is putting together these nice sort of one-page sheets that show the future land use description, give some examples from Urbana with images. They also sometimes will pull images from other cities around the country as well if they found good examples there. So the categories are residential, mixed residential, mixed use, and that's core, and then secondary and commercial, institutional, green spaces and recreation, and industrial. I'm guessing there's probably not going to be a whole lot of discussion about green spaces and recreation, industrial, or institutional, and maybe we'll have more discussion on the others. But yeah, we can talk about whatever y'all would like to get into. Another thing that the students have done is they've gotten through 4 of these, and these are really nice because they're kind of outlining concepts that are in the plan, and this sort of gets to the form that we would like to see. Like these are kind of idealized forms for these different things. So this is the sort of a residential layout, and it's really nice. I think where did we steal this idea from, Dustin? Okay, Charlotte. To some extent, yeah. Yeah, we borrowed good parts of it and probably made it better, right?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the students just came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe they stole the idea from our 2005 plan. Yeah. It's good. So yeah, but you see like some of the ideas that we've been discussing from the plan, things like connectivity, traffic calming, walkability, and some other things like sort of green infrastructure is the term. So yeah, so that's the residential one, and you'll see in the legend on the right, you see there's kind of a mix of single family. There's some duplexes. There's also townhomes in there, so that matches with the description on the previous page, which says it's primarily detached housing with some duplexes and townhouses. I guess one thing that's not in there, unless I'm missing it, is any sort of so this concept that we should allow for a sort of small scale businesses throughout. I just realized that we didn't maybe add a little, a little corner store or something in there. So, or it also says neighborhood serving institutional uses. So, like a church or a mosque or something could also probably fit in there as well. And then,
So I don't know, we want to, how much interaction we want to do versus presenting.
Lots
But
of interaction.
I think.
yeah,
what-
let's have
what-
interaction.
Let's
yeah.
have interaction.
Yeah, okay. So when you bring up the point that this example doesn't include any businesses, it brings up two questions in my mind. We have this problem of talking about land uses. And in many of these, we're actually talking about development types that have multiple land uses. So if we may want to call them something other than land use types. We might want to call them, well, you often are referring to them as neighborhood types, but development types, so that we can talk about the land uses that make up a development type. And another piece of this, because then we could put a retail node or whatever in a diagram like this,
Yeah.
but we'd be still distinguishing land uses, which might actually later indicate zoning that we're not dealing with explicitly at the moment. Second thing is, when you talk about small businesses and neighborhoods, there's an ambiguity of what that term means. Because your descriptions include home businesses. So home businesses would not appear in this diagram because they wouldn't look any different from any other house. Or they couldn't qualify as a home business.
Yeah.
So if businesses in a residential neighborhood as opposed to a mixed-use neighborhood actually means home-based businesses, then we have to be explicit about that. And if it means a small retail node or whatever, we need to be.
Professional office that
So-
receives customers.
Well,
Yeah.
you can do that as a home business with, in the current zoning ordinance, there are certain limits, but the home office doesn't look here any different, whereas a small retail store does, it has to meet different conditions. So, yeah, I
You
think
can
that,
put a shingle out, but to have,
yeah, and currently.
As long as
I
it's
mean,
no
I-
bigger than 3 square feet.
Right, exactly. I mean, so, and a reason these details matter, though they, we don't want to jump all the way to the zoning ordinance and what size the sign is. It's because the plan in the end is going to be the backing for any modifications to that zoning ordinance.
Right.
And if what we mean is we want to encourage home businesses, we need to say that. And if what we mean is we want more spatially distributed retail businesses or other kinds of commercial, we need to, that's a different land use.
Yeah. Yeah, and the intent is not just for it to be home-based businesses. Although it might be kind of interesting to, all these houses look the same, but if you, did have like a call out that said, hey, and these houses have businesses.
Well,
but they
what's
just
not
look
a
the same.
home-based business that would be there?
Yeah, I mean like a little corner store or like a coffee shop or something without a drive-through. Like a
In residential?
neighborhood serving
Not even
business.
in mixed residential?
Yeah, I think that's the intent, because if we're talking about having more complete neighborhoods, I think we,
Okay, so again, it gets back to, we have to decide whether we're talking about
yeah,
development patterns of a neighborhood of a given scope or land uses.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be like really low intensity stuff, right? But how do you tease that out?
Well, I think what Lou is saying is there's more than one way to create complete neighborhoods, right? So it could be a finer grain distribution of different land uses, different zoning categories,
Yeah.
as well as allowing certain things within certain land uses or certain zoning categories. So, yeah, we should just figure out which approach and to what extent, we're allowing different things in residential uses as opposed to distributing commercial corridors of different intensities throughout the city so that we have complete neighborhoods, in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the original question of what to call this. So the Charlotte plan calls these place types, which is another,
Okay.
I think, development types, place types, just
Yeah, I
other
feel
ideas.
like I
throw out
kind of
there.
like place better.
Yeah.
I feel like development has a bad name.
You mean several things, yeah.
Yeah.
Lou, you had another term too, besides development types.
I don't remember, but I think, place types is fine. I may have said neighborhood types, but that's a problem, that has its other, that's
Okay, yeah.
has another problem. I think place types is probably more neutral with respect to other hazards. But the key point is, we have to have some distinction between levels of aggregation of what we're talking about. So a land use type eventually is going to be at least implicitly linked to notions of land use categories specified in a zoning ordinance. And I don't think we want to let that confusion carry, because we're trying to create the notion, as Dustin just said, that land use types may be distributed at various grains. And when we get to zoning, there are two ways to do that. What set of types do you allow within one zoning district? And what sizes, chunks of land, where do you assign that district to? And we're going to eventually do both. And the more of that we get reasonably clear in the plan, the easier it's going to be when we get to the zoning ordinance.
Right.
So I interrupted you, and you were.
No, no,
No,
that's,
no.
I mean, I'm
the
just,
tension-
Yeah.
it's
I'm
fine,
just
but
gonna be going through,
Yeah,
going
we're
through
back
these
to
in
wherever
order,
you
so-
were, I think.
But I think that's good feedback.
Unless somebody else has something.
It's good feedback to help us then,
Yeah,
differentiate and make it more clear.
I'll just add too, that there's supposed to be more to this graphic. So the other main thing that this is meant to show is change over time. And I don't know, I didn't check what files were uploaded, but the idea is to have kind of a before and after
yeah,
panel. So the before panel would be the two sides of existing development with vacant land in the middle, but showing where the stubbed streets are, so that it
Yeah.
suggests, if someone is going to develop this vacant land, that they need to think about how they make the connections between the existing development on either side of it. And so then that's what the second panel is. So we're trying to accomplish multiple things with these graphics, showing change over time and the need to think about connectivity, but also patterns of development and development types.
okay, then sort of stepping up in intensity. And I like to think of these as sort of just a continuum of, of sort of lower intensity up to higher intensity. And then you've got sort of your specialty things like green spaces there's a few that sort of like separate categories that don't quite fit into that. So mixed residential neighborhoods. So on this graphic, you'll notice that a couple of those, the two on the right side are from the mixed. Well, actually, I don't know if 611 West Elm is in the mixed office residential district, but 405 West Green Street is, and I think that the that MOR, the mixed office residential district, does a pretty good job of being sort of a lower intensity mixed type of neighborhood with not just housing and not just businesses. So there's a few businesses along there. But yeah, so this, in the description, you see it steps up intensity just with the housing types. So duplexes, townhomes, and apartments. So we're adding apartments in there, still including the neighborhood serving businesses and institutional uses.
So thinking about what I think we're trying to accomplish, and it's also partly thinking about the MOR as the sort of best example, closest example we've got at the moment. I think we should not talk about neighborhood serving businesses. Because as Bill pointed out, in this kind of neighborhood, offices, and not just home offices, but an office building the size of one of these apartment buildings, in my view, could be in the same neighborhood. Now, whether we still call that mixed residential or that's mixed use, we need to clarify. But
Yeah.
neighborhood serving businesses, I don't think is the right label, because that's actually probably not what they're gonna be.
Yeah, it's too narrow.
Brainy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in many cases, that's probably, if it's a neighborhood serving business that's gonna stay in business, it's much more likely to be in a node intentionally identified spatially as a place for it to be. That is, it's gonna be at the residential collector intersection with a minor arterial, or it's gonna be at the intersection of two residential collectors. It's not gonna be on access streets. So we're gonna either define by rules, like I just stated, or by district spatial patterns, where those go. Again, I'm not sure what the better term is, but neighborhood serving business, I think, is the wrong, it's almost not what we want. You know, the home insurance office isn't a neighborhood serving business.
Right.
In fact, you know, a home insurance office may be online serving statewide.
Yeah, and there's like law offices in the
Yeah,
in
or
that district,
whatever.
and I doubt the neighborhood needs that many law services. I don't know.
But the law service couldn't survive if it's market where the neighborhood. That's
Right.
what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and that's
The
yeah.
kinds of things we want are not, so we need a different label there.
Kevin, could you go back to the previous?
I can, yeah.
What strikes me here, I'm picturing someone trying to use this to imagine the neighborhood, to perhaps imagine development in the neighborhood. And what we photograph and what we sketch shows two very different things. This shows up here particularly, a little bit in others, but here it's strongest. That you have a streetscape on the one and images of buildings in another. And if we're trying to draw a picture of what a neighborhood is, then it's hard to put the streetscape and the solitary objects as they appear here as, it's sort of like what we have doesn't make a streetscape and we want a streetscape, daggone, you know, something like that. That's the story that this set of images tells me. And I'm wondering, you know, I'd like to bring them together. I'd like to see what's aspirational in a drawing be within reach of what we show existing.
Reaction specifically to that. These sketches don't match
No,
what we're talking about. And
okay,
it's,
yeah,
has to do with
I
where
agree.
they came from and who chose them. But the second thing is, the students also have done ability connections, whatever, that includes street cross-sections or street type. I don't think we have access to them.
We don't yet. Yeah.
So I think that will get at what you're concerned with.
Yeah,
Cross-section,
yeah.
which, and some of them are really good. Both the right-of-way, the relationship, buildings on both sides, in other words, curb-to-curb
Right, right.
street profiles
Right.
there.
Yeah,
They're equivalent of these, but they're,
right, yeah.
and maybe we need to think about co-locate somehow with these.
Yeah, yeah. In sketches that we saw previously, they seemed non-urbana, and I don't want to add burden to those responsible for drawing these beautiful sketches, but somehow I prefer a link between actual photographs, a stronger link between the actual photographs and the sketches that we intend to use.
So
Yeah, I don't think the students actually drew these. These are just found images.
Yeah.
But I think
Some
they,
of them are and some
yeah,
aren't.
there's
These
a
two
couple,
aren't.
but I think they included them more for this for discussion purposes. So, but to me, the other piece of this is that the images of the buildings are more what I think of as development types, and I think what you're asking about are place types.
Yeah.
So, and I think part of that is why this was done. So the following page is
Yeah.
getting at more of the place type, but
Yeah.
you want to see what it looks like walking down the street in part of this place type,
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing. Something like that.
Putting a burden on somebody that would be too great for me to take, but could we have these images work in a way that someone could say, I get it, here's what we have, but here's where we're going. That couldn't pay me to do that job, but boy, it would be really nice if,
And you bring up a really good perspective, because I don't think when we were doing these photos that we were really thinking aspirational. It was just examples of this type of use. And so maybe that is something we should do, have aspirational, but those photos weren't intended to be that. They were intended to just be additional examples.
the, linking the image to what we're trying to achieve is,
Yeah,
is,
absolutely.
Is important, and it comes up in the next slide that you're going to show, and that is, that this appears as infill, full infill of in the next image.
Yeah.
And I've been imagining what, of a large parcel, and I was wondering how an image like this might be possible, it might not, for incremental infill, as we were discussing previously. I don't know how you could instruct that. the way we can provide good instruction with this, but, well, I mean, I picture this beginning, this not existing and existing to the left and right, and this entire thing is filled in.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the same, if someone who imagines smaller incremental infill in an existing, one parcel, other parcels.
You're talking about like filling in 2 buildings
Yeah,
or redeveloping?
Yeah.
redevelopment at a smaller scale. If we can, if we're promoting that and we're promoting this, I'd kind of like to see both portrayed.
Yeah, I really like that idea because, yeah, these illustrations that we're showing are, you know, it's almost like the current mode of development where you just have a giant site and everything gets built all at once, right?
Right.
But if we had one of these where it's like you had, say, you know, a bunch of existing buildings that were all sort of in gray, but you had some vacant sites or something, and then you could show sort of a change of like those sites getting filled in over time.
Go back to that previous.
Some buildings
previous
changing.
slide.
This one or the one
Yeah,
before?
so, I mean, 405 West Green is an example of that, right? So
Yeah.
405
Right.
West Green is an infill project, that if you expand out the view of that, you would see an old, you know, house on one
Right.
side and an old house on the other side.
Right.
So,
Could do the same way we did this. Get a picture of before
yeah,
and
Yeah, it was a pretty, I'd say, not cared after house. I think it was just a single story, I guess. It was, yeah.
yeah,
the 3 houses would be there.
Yeah, right,
And then there'd be this
yeah.
in the middle.
but in
Dustin, you
plan
bring up,
view or in,
Oh, I was-
You're thinking of photo.
Oh, well, no, I mean,
You want plan view as well.
Yeah,
yes, I was thinking plan view as well.
yeah, I
And
really.
what you
yeah.
described of having sort of a grade area with splotches of, that show, yeah,
Dustin, you bring up a good point about the one photo. You know what it is, you know it's infill, but the picture really doesn't say that. Because if you don't have that institutional knowledge, you don't know that, oh yeah, that replaced, like Lou said.
So doing what we just described, I think you hit it. Anyway. 405 West Green. Other is the one we were just.
Right.
at which I larger area, multiple, is what,
staggered changes, you mean? Maybe it wouldn't all be done
so
fell swoop?
when we did this. Oh, sorry,
That's the voice of God.
I'm sorry. We might do it with 3 or 4 pages where it would not all happen at once.
Right.
But it would show. And the other thing that this gets back to in my mind is we need to be much more careful about our uses of the word incremental, infill,
Yeah.
and redevelopment, because they are 3 different things. And this discussion is getting at the way people think about those things. Because even the big one we're talking about now is an important piece of incremental, because what it's doing is saying that two subdivisions were built with stub streets, an increment and a leapfrog, and then something else came later, 3 steps process, so that's incremental.
Yeah.
But it's big increments, or bigger increments, but there's still a problem of connecting them, because you've got to connect the streets, they've got to have connectivity, they've got to relate to each other. So having all 3 types explicit so people other than us understand what we're talking about.
And we neglected to attach the definition page with what you have, so that's another piece that we need to provide to you to get that kind of feedback
Right,
on
well,
what
but-
that differentiation is.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
if we get to the revised stuff here.
Right.
Which it's an issue in this.
And
how
we
those-
do have those definitions, the hover definitions.
No,
are there.
but,
I'm
but
sorry.
what I'm talking about now is not the definitions, but the use of the terms sort of ambiguously.
Yeah.
Ambiguously, so that we miss what we're actually talking about. We need to be, anyway, we can
Okay.
get back to that if we
Und-
get through the
Understood, you,
language.
you raise a great point.
Okay.
Somebody's taking notes so we know what.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, so moving along in intensity. So then we get into the mixed use, which again, we're talking sort of the core, so like the downtown type areas, places like Gregory Place by the university, I think would be, that's more of a core type of a mixed use area. And then we describe sort of the lesser intense ones as secondary. Again, totally not married to these terms. But so we describe them as medium to high density with a mix of business, office, multi-story, mixed residential, and institutional uses.
Could I ask a question? It seems like we'll call them drawings, the ones that aren't the actual photos, seem to be causing some confusion about what they represent. Like, are they supposed to be aspirational or examples? Are we better not using that type and just stick with the actual photographs? Just like to have
think
some
so, yeah.
feedback on that.
I think that's, given our resources to get them drawn exactly what we want, I think at the moment, that's the best solution.
Is to just go with the photos,
Well,
or,
to say that the ones we have are not working, let's put it that way. And that unless we come out with a way to get something more useful
Or
to
exact.
communicate,
Mhm.
that we're better off without them.
Yeah, or using just images of existing development that
Right.
is similar to what we're imagining. I
think
mean,
maybe-
honestly, the students shifted away from that to making these things.
Yeah,
so
which
that's-
are
That's why.
Very useful, so yeah.
right, they're not
That's
so
good.
exact, yeah. Yeah, I think it just seems like they're causing confusion, and I think if we could just remove
Agreed.
those and.
I don't know that this one about the secondary core is that bad.
Well, one about the secondary.
I mean, you got a little business in the middle. The
But
sketch,
you're talking about the lower left of the upper 4?
yeah.
Second,
Yeah,
second
yes,
row.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, this one.
But
Right here.
I still think it's problematic. Because if that's a node, like Washington and Philo, it's not at all clear what's going on. Partly because the sketch has some scale problems and so on. I think it,
it would be better to just find images of
Okay.
existing places that are similar to.
Yeah,
what
and
we
they
have
don't
in mind.
have to be, I don't think they have to be Urbana actual photos, but just some good.
But
good
I would
representation.
avoid picturing Burlington, Vermont. It's not like we want to be Burlington, Vermont, and I think some users of this document could interpret that are we headed in that direction?
well, it would be it is likely that if we can find images from Champaign-Urbana,
Would be preferred, yeah.
that they will communicate more effectively. Because people will understand them better.
How about if the images were, I mean, it's tough to use a street image in a way. Suppose you used a somewhat aerial drone that captured a half dozen adjacent buildings where you were able to point things. Something that, we're limited if we're doing
Yeah.
streetscape, what we show for downtown Urbana in this sort of is at the upper limit of what we're able to achieve, I think, given the spacing of the buildings. Somehow we could have an Urbana image that was able to convey more information and teach better. It might help.
Talking about a low-angle aerial.
Yeah, like a low-angle aerial where
And we
you're-
have historical ones, right?
Of like oblique
Yeah,
aerials.
obliques.
We do have some from a really long time ago. I'd have to look into it. We've got access to software actually that could give that to us, but I have to see what sort of
Yeah,
the
that might
licensing
be very
would be.
helpful, yeah.
But yeah, I could pull some of that, some examples and toss them in here. I had not thought of that, so it's a
Yeah.
really good
Okay.
suggestion.
Yeah.
That's the Charlotte plan that we've been looking at. That's the
Uh-huh.
kind of images that they use, this kind of, not bird's eye, but, something
Yeah.
elevated off the ground.
Yeah, and if
No
for
drone
whatever,
hobbyist in the city that can,
pardon?
there's no drone hobbyist in the city that wants
We know
to-
some drone people. Also, the Park District has at least one person on staff that has the licensing to operate, the license to drone. So, yeah.
Doing, I mean, seeing the Charlotte example, but also as a way to do street views, this could be particularly useful. And probably much more useful than the sketches, even if
Okay.
And if what we do in the plan is for infill, for example, where if we have a lot of gray, but we have highlights, each of which illustrate possibilities, then somehow that, if instead of drones, we used software that somehow captured the actual image, we could do the same kind of highlighting of a shot.
Yeah.
so you could do that in sketch. You, not me, could do that in SketchUp. You
One,
as
yes,
somebody
one could do that.
who's
Yeah.
familiar with SketchUp. Anyway, some of these things are aspirational in both senses,
No. I know.
but aspirations are good.
Okay, so yeah, so then we've got this diagram that looks suspiciously like the pines.
Say that.
Funny thing about that.
I mean, it does, but yeah.
So, again, it's sort of a question of how much nitty-gritty we want to get into, but in reading through the comments on these that are in the text, there's some cleanup that needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree.
But, I'm not putting that on you or whatever. I'm just saying these are drafts.
Yeah.
How much of a problem, or do you think it is a problem, that many in Urbana will recognize this as close to the pines?
I don't think it's a problem at all because you've got
Okay.
the southern half of the pines is undeveloped, actually more than the southern half.
Right,
So,
yeah. So,
And I think it's a good example of infill. I mean, that's what they've done. They've added, each little section
Right,
Yeah,
and,
at a
and
time.
that's sort of the intent. So if it's not that big a problem, then I think we can maybe make even sharper some of the word descriptions of what this is about. Because that's part of the idea of doing this was, I think it came from one of the responses online to something earlier. A respondent suggested, why can't the Pines be filled in with residential? And so we thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's a reasonable, interesting idea. What happens? And it becomes consistent with a whole lot of things we're trying to talk about, which this then becomes a node, which it is sort of, I mean, we need to, again, articulate it even more strongly, I think, in the other parts of the document. But just, I wanted to see what reaction there was, because
I have a technical question. We show ponds of different sizes, and I recall the discussion we had about the detention or retention pond at Hope. Are these graphic devices, or can these really go where we're showing them?
Well, this one's there.
This one's there.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the ones in the other examples are at least there because we think the detention or the stormwater ordinance would require on sites of that scale of new development, meaning the DART site or the infill up north, that detention would be required in order to meet the requirements. So we haven't done the engineering design to say, how big does this have to be?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, but there are detention ponds there because
Yeah, it would,
we
there,
think
Maybe
that
we
would
need a
be part of it.
I
disclaimer.
haven't seen any small ones. I'm familiar with larger ones everywhere in town.
Yeah.
well, there's
Well,
some small ones in
Sure.
subdivisions, yeah.
Are there?
oh, yeah. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then we get into commercial, which is, much more intense, much more focused on just, business uses. We did add that last statement that higher density residential uses may be appropriate there, because they may be. And just along the lines of talking about sort of a continuum, we feel like that makes sense.
So again, I think we got to come up with another label. Not only this is not a future land use description,
Yeah.
but it's not commercial.
Yeah. What I don't really like the term commercial all
But
that
I haven't
much.
come up, I mean, we've already talked about this. I haven't come up with a better one yet.
Yeah.
And one solution that I've found when I can't come up with a better term is to use more than one term.
Yeah.
So it might be commercial and something, or, I don't know. But I think we also want to make clear here that in one sense, this is about higher intensity development, and the use actually doesn't matter. In other words, this could be office buildings, this could be labs, it could be residential, it could be retail, it could be multi-uses in the same building.
That's exactly what,
I'm
He was
comfortable
referring-
with the use of the term commercial just because it fits with architecture and construction to distinguish commercial from residential.
Yeah,
And
well,
their
that-
ter- their
I can see
version-
how that connotation works, but if we're going to do that, then we have to be much more explicit and include, not just talk about business, retail, restaurants. We need to talk about a whole bunch of other things.
well, going back to the point that was raised earlier, and I know Kevin mentioned it too, when we were first looking at these different types, whatever, we're calling them, we really did talk about a continuum of intensity. And I think that's what you're hitting on as well. You know, is that a better way to look at it? You know, that,
Well, there's also a subtlety about continuum, because I do think we want breaks.
yeah.
Because I think we
continuum is not
want
the right word, I
discrete
think.
breaks, but is it a succession of
Right, I
of
wasn't,
increasing intensity?
exactly.
Okay, but we want breaks. And in some cases, for different uses, the use actually matters, not just the intensity. And this gets, when we get to the next category of industrial, there's an issue that is related to this.
Well, let's get to it.
Well,
Oh, wait, we
Part-
gotta
part
go
of
through
what
this
we had-
first.
we were talking about was that you would have, I mean, it would kind of, what we would have in the past called light industrial would have made,
Yeah.
would make sense in commercial. So
It-
like biotech, you know, companies or something like that would make sense in a commercial place type.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that was one reason, I think does the existing,
I
let's
think we
see.
had, I think in the other plan, it was light industrial was in with office, and that
Yeah.
didn't seem quite right either.
Yeah.
well, but it's partly
Oh, yeah.
because light industrial, so, again, we've got uses, we've got development types, sometimes they matter, sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
We've learned that we don't want self-storage in commercial areas unless it's interior and designed for an urban context. We don't want warehouses because of truck traffic and nighttime activity. Warehouses might have been considered light industrial 20 years ago when 2005 was put together. So, commercial may be a word we can use for a category, but I think we have to maybe, I'm trying to think how to do this, almost in, at least in our heads, simulate the translation to a zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
And think about when we establish a category, so my 5 attributes that apply to this as well as the zoning ordinance. There's use, the activity that occurs there, there's the physical form, there's the interaction and effects, the externalities on other places. There's ownership, like in institutional, and there's change. That is, by defining the attributes, how do we allow it to change over time? And we need to, if we're gonna talk about aggregates of use types or aggregates of any of these things, we've gotta acknowledge all of that at both levels. And we're sort of doing it. It's not that we're not doing it at all. It's that there's some refinement we need to do.
What if we called it like a activity center or something like that? I mean, it could also be varied, like the Charlotte plan, for example, uses community activity center, which would be something that would be more neighborhood focused, right? So hypothetical redevelopment of the DART site, right? It's mostly residential, but maybe it has this node of retail and
Yeah.
cafes or whatever. So
Yeah.
would that be something better described as a community activity center, whereas what we now call commercial out on North Cunningham would be more of a regional activity center?
So this gets to place types,
Right.
which is what
Place
you're now
types,
describing, as opposed to uses.
Right.
And much of what these site diagrams that the students have done are about place types, less than they're about uses.
Mhm.
So, um, But the activity centers, because when we
Yeah.
get to the larger perspective maps, we're going to have to talk about places in that way, the nodes that, and corridors and places.
I will point out that when we get to the map showing changes between the existing future land use and then this draft form, a fair amount of areas in that show up as change were because I changed it from light industrial office just over to this commercial because I thought it should just be this more inclusive thing to pull in that stuff. So I'll point out some examples of that.
Something like activity center, could it be even more inclusive?
Yeah.
In some more terms like that for
Yeah,
other,
I mean, that's
other,
just was in front of me,
areas,
but
yeah.
I'm sure there's other
Yeah.
things we could come up with.
All right, and then we've got sort of what I'm describing. Well, did we get to industrial? No, not yet. But so institutional is sort of something I just consider sort of a special circumstance. So it's just big campus type things. So your hospitals and your universities and larger or like government spaces and such.
so, as you've heard too many times, I have a problem with institutional as a category. But let's think about it in the context of a plan, as opposed to a zoning or a regulatory context. Are we planning for institutional spatial patterns?
Like in this plan, or are we just?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, in the context that we're talking about now, how are we going to use the notion of institutional in the plan? We're labeling existing institutional to
Right.
keep track of where we are.
Yeah.
And if that's what we're doing, then it sort of doesn't matter too much.
Yeah.
If we're trying to think about institutional as something we're planning for the future, then I think we have to be pretty specific about what we're up to.
Yeah, okay. So now that I understand your question, no, we are not planning for institutional. This is just basically showing
And-
the
and-
extent of the institutional land holdings today.
We may go a step further and even say we would probably discourage more institutional
Well-
because it means it's tax, it doesn't pay property taxes,
Right, which could be a reason to actually highlight this from, your point is part of what I was trying to
Trying to
get
say.
at.
Yeah.
The last thing we want is more of this.
Yeah.
And,
But it includes religious uses, which could occur in any district or any.
Right,
area,
and we didn't,
technically.
yeah, and we didn't map like all the small churches and things around town because
Yeah.
that can occur in just residential areas too. This is mostly just mapping big campus-y type stuff.
so one of my reactions is, we might, if we think of these descriptions we're working on as place types, for the moment, using that terms, which incorporate descriptions of development types, whatever you want to call them, more than just use, but use, physical form, et cetera, then we might just eliminate the institutional category. Because the only thing that distinguishes the institutional category from any of the other things we're talking about is the regulatory conditions and the property tax conditions of institutional uses. And if we want to imply, like your description of mixed use or residential, which allows institutional uses such as schools or churches,
Yeah.
that's a line we in some sense both want, and even if we didn't, we couldn't do anything about it. Whereas this kind of stuff, please know that we want no. And I don't think we need it as a category.
Yeah, I mean,
Just had it as like a non-category color, like, gray on the map and label them what they are, but not call it out as a future land use or?
Well, so I guess what I'm saying is.
Well, the university in particular,
Yeah.
like, there's a big chunk of land.
So let's think about this two different ways. A future land use map includes a lot of existing stuff. Most of a future land use map is actually not about the future at all. So we can identify on the future land use map institutional uses, but we don't have a land use description of institutional use. Because to me, the land use description we're giving here makes no sense.
Yeah, better to describe it in the other place types where it would be appropriate to have those things, right?
Well, for uses that would be appropriate, churches, schools, et
Yeah,
cetera.
that's what I'm saying.
But not list colleges, county courthouses, federal courthouses, nonprofit hospitals. I may be missing something here, county offices.
Schools is another one.
Yeah, but I mean, we're gonna have schools.
Yeah.
But we don't need any more of these other things, which is what most of the examples here are. Well, one's a firehouse, we're gonna have firehouses, but that's the city.
But then you look
so-
at the example where we have, the county plaza is now going to become a government building. So that went from a private sector use to an
We
institutional
lost the
use.
tax base.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Did we lose the tax base?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
but it's still, yeah, I mean, the use is, it's an office building, and it's going to
Exactly, that's what I'm
remain, yeah,
trying to get
yeah,
at.
yeah.
That for all of our other purposes, in terms of physical form, activity center, whatever, it's an office building.
Yep.
And if you go to the 5 attributes, it happens to be owned by a public entity that doesn't pay property taxes. That's an attribute of that place that gives us pain.
Sort of like parks. I mean,
Right,
They
but
don't
if-
pay taxes and they're there, you know?
Right, but there's another reason to not put them in a category of institutional, which some people do because of the ownership issue, but they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I agree with that, I mean, that it's there, so it belongs on the map, but we're talking about manipulating built fabric, and this isn't part of what we have our hands on, really.
I'm trying to think through an example. So like Brookins is shown in blue on this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say Brookins is vacated and there's potential for it to be redeveloped and someone comes in with a proposal and wants
Yeah.
to rezone it, right?
Right, and we say
We would
it's-
look at, we would want to have guidance to say, oh, that's a community activity center and that allows these kinds of things. and
Right.
That makes sense with the proposed rezoning, right?
And we want
Yeah, we
something
don't-
like mixed use or commercial. It's an activity center, and an activity center has this sort of.
Yeah, because one thing we
Leave it-
don't want is for it to
If we
say
leave it as blue,
institutional, yeah.
We wouldn't get to that.
Right.
We wouldn't have that.
And another example would have been the county nursing home, how that then got sold and it became private sector.
Yeah.
And how is that?
I
So
think
so
that's all a
th-
blue blob right
It
now.
is, yeah, yeah, it is.
So this is crucial, that when I said, it reports what is, we need to not just leave it as institutional if that's what we don't want it to be, which is another reason to not use the category. So maybe your previous suggestion of not using a common color for the university, the courthouses, the whatever, but
Just label it.
Yeah,
label them, because most of them, we could do that.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And the ones that really, 'cause I thought about a similar thing a few months ago, is these university properties that are up in the, to the northeast of town. They have some forests out there, and they're in big blue blobs on our current future land use map, and I carried that over to these, and I was thinking, why are these blue? These should be probably green space. Yeah, probably just green. So,
But may be labeled on the annotated detailed
Yeah.
version so we know what they are.
Yeah. Okay. All right, get rid of that. Okay, on to industrial. So this is, you know, the current plan says heavy industrial, and then it says light industrial / office. We just went with straight like industrial because that's sort of what people think of as heavier industrial uses. So that includes sort of big manufacturing and processing. It does say research and development, which it could fit in there, but it shouldn't be the only place where that is because that's not really a noxious use or anything. And warehousing and distribution, so kind of just high traffic stuff or sort of like, you know, nastier stuff that you don't want where you live. And so really the only area that is now painted industrial is sort of this area north of, you know, like on Lincoln Avenue north of 74, and then sort of up west of Cunningham once you get north of Farm and Fleet.
So, I think maybe this is what you're saying. If industrial is going to be only heavy industrial, which I think it should be. I mean, we've got to have that category distinct from other things.
Yeah.
So if that's what it's going to mean. But I think we should explicitly identify some of the stuff you just said. Noxious.
Yeah,
It's the externalities that's the issue in the industrial.
Yeah.
But the other, in our case, is rail access.
yeah,
So I would argue that we don't want offices on North Lincoln because we're giving up parcels
yeah,
that have access. And we've been working pretty hard to keep the stuff up there, either rail needed or rail associated, like the concrete plant that
yeah,
we did a couple years ago. There is a way to treat heavy industrial as a positive opportunity rather than thinking of it as, oh, we're just going to keep that up there in that corner where nobody cares about it. That's Urbana's opportunity to have heavy industry.
yeah. I mean, it's got great access to highway and rail
Rail.
right there. So yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where, so warehouses, the noxious effects, as I think you just said, are pretty specific. They're traffic-related, freight traffic in particular related, and noxious effects, external effects,
yeah,
noise, dust, lights, whatever. And then we have to be, you know, the flip side is we have to be really clear, say, north of Farm and Fleet, is that also heavy industry? Or is that something else? Is that commercial in our new definition of commercial or whatever? And I don't know the answer to that immediately, but I think it's different.
yeah. I mean, it's not like the airport is. Like that's not a noxious type thing, right?
Well, it has its own
Or-
set of,
Yeah, it's kind of
there's so many rules
Something, yeah.
specific to an airport,
yeah,
but Frasca Aviation's office and manufacturing facility are not noxious as far as I know. And therefore, I think of it as a different kind of area. Plus, it's not clear that we want heavy industry along North 45,
yeah.
because we might want other stuff up there.
Yeah, okay. Okay, onward. Green spaces and recreation. This is essentially this. Is it the same? I think it's pretty close to what we have existing. I threw in cemeteries here because they used to be an institutional, and that made no sense to me. because they're green spaces.
So again, what are we actually classifying here? And I think we're moving toward classifying not so much by ownership or institutional. So if we're gonna have the university forests be described as green space, then cemeteries can be described as green space. And then it means we have to explain what is in our green space and recreation category and why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably a sentence or two to add about why certain things are there that
Okay.
might not otherwise be there.
I mean, we don't say why. So, yeah.
So were we saying to get rid of this as a category too then, or
What?
green space? No.
No, well,
But we're not planning,
Yeah.
the same sort of logic, we're not planning for future green space, right?
I disagree.
Well, I threw some green space up along the
Oh, I didn't
Saline
know, I'm
Branch.
asking, that was a question, not
Yeah.
not a statement.
Yeah.
Kickapoo Rail Trail.
Okay,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Del Coleman property.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's on there.
The boneyard,
Okay.
and I haven't given up on a couple other things like rural residential in the Northeast, which is also a green space related thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some in the industrial zone, there's a buffer implied along the upper Saline.
And
So
is
I
this
think we very much are
consist-
planning for it.
is it consistent with park district plans and forest district? Forest
I will.
plans.
I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
but I'll check and make sure.
Okay,
We had a really good meeting with the park district a little while back, and yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same page with things. They're focusing more like not on expanding outside of the city boundaries and things, and looking more at park infill, I guess you would call it. So that's good.
But some of the buffers and so on aren't necessarily Park District property, but they're still of interest to the city in terms of floodway and stuff like that,
Yeah.
even if
And-
they're in the ETJ.
Yeah, and we might want to discuss the one that's sort of up along Lincoln Avenue. I just kind of painted it pretty sort of green to the east side of Lincoln Avenue.
Yeah, well, this gets back to the heavy industry and how far over it comes. And you've, at the moment, I think, got it just left of Lincoln Avenue.
Yeah,
But we've already got the cement plant on the right side of Lincoln Avenue. And I think we want to
Yeah.
include that as that.
it is. So basically the only place that I put, and I'm gonna,
Oh, I
Oops.
see.
Yeah.
I misread where I was on the map.
yeah, I'm just gonna pull up. Oh, I had a link to it, but I think when you
Yeah,
move it over, it doesn't have smart links.
I was,
does that shape the floodplain, or what is that?
Yeah.
No,
Part of the?
I mean, sort of. I just did a buffer, I think, of a couple hundred feet.
Okay, on the floodplain or
Well-
on the,
On just the center line of the Saline Branch.
to the east, but you've everything east of Lincoln.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah, so this over
that-
here is 200 feet, I think.
So-
And then, yeah,
I agree, we need to work on that, details of that, because as protection of the saline, we want it there.
right.
But I think on the left, we need to think about future land use there, because it's well within the ETJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that's also where the Olympic Drive dead end is.
yeah.
So we have to protect that right of way.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to just doing a couple 100-foot buffer and then, making the rest of it something else. I mean, they do have, yeah, I mean, there's some houses up there. There's Prairie Fruits Farm.
is up
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not going anywhere anytime soon, so.
Yeah, well, it did get sold, remember?
Yeah.
One of the things, and this may be the prompt to bring it up, I think we still need a rural residential place type. And this would be another example of where it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
But also in Northeast Urbana, on the east side of the sailing, we need a distinction of development or place type there, because it should not be sewered. And if it should not be sewered, it implies a different development type.
Yeah.
Lou, how do you define rural? I mean, is that in the ETJ or what, how do you
So
classify?
it's defined in the 2005 plan, and it was defined for specific purposes. One was because of sewerage, and the other was because of road network type. We basically argued that we did not want any bridges across the saline between Perkins Road and Olympian Drive, I think.
So
Okay.
they're still in the city limits?
No, most of this is in the
Okay,
ETJ.
that's what I
Yeah.
thought you were saying.
Yeah, this,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we have to deal with the ETJ.
Sure.
It comes to us, and these are the issues that matter when it comes to us. So if we don't have that specific backing, we don't remember what to do. And we may not have the backing to do it if we want to. So I think the rural residential place type could be added to our place types. And I think we now have 2 places to apply it.
Yeah.
And the ETJ extends past Fort Harris Road.
Yeah.
So I don't know what, we're not defining for the most part at the moment place types for the ETJ. But to a certain extent, we should. That is, I don't think we have to be exhaustive, but as I explained, there's a reason to me to define those two. To the east and south, I think we can use the sewer problem expansion as the definition. Basically, that limits it on the east and the south, and anything beyond that can be treated as agricultural for our purposes at the moment.
All right, I can get back to this. Okay, then I also included in here, and you all got this as well, is that map of changes, which, like, based on what we were just talking about, a lot of the purple area on the northeast is gonna revert back to rural residential, so it wouldn't actually be shifting. And then, I mean, I can just kind of sort of describe some of these bits. Yeah, a lot of this was, so, you know what, I should just pull up the actual map so we can zoom in on it. Nope, that's not it. Okay, so yeah, this whole area up in the northeast, we can change back to rural residential.
It might not be the whole area
Right.
based on sewer. I think it is, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because sewer expansion to the north by gravity for part of that is possible, and we want to encourage that because it's the cheapest expansion.
Oh, like up here, yeah.
Well,
Right.
I think
Like,
it includes over, I think it's this area, but it should be on one of our maps, but it's hard to read because that map, it's there, but it's almost unreadable.
oh, yeah. Well, I can pull that up if we want to talk about
Well,
that too.
Can you read it on the computer any better than you can on the paper?
Yeah. Development opportunity map. Yeah. Whoops. Yeah, I really like this map. It's got some
Yeah,
good
okay,
things
so,
happening.
so
So,
the dotted area here
yeah.
is the area serviceable by sewers by gravity, unserviced but serviceable by gravity.
Yeah.
And the area to the right that is not serviced,
Yeah.
and the serviced line is the red dotted dashed line. It's already serviced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This.
It's the area over
yeah.
here.
Yep.
That's what we would call rural residential then.
Yeah.
Is-
Now, that, the service line being east of the saline makes no sense to me. I think that's the service area line, not the service line.
Yeah.
But I gotta check that. Oh, no, that's the
That's not the.
That's
the
the
salient,
annexation, that's the, what
that's
is that?
Cunningham.
Pardon?
That's Cunningham.
No, this area here.
I'm
Dustin,
talking about this
look.
right here. If the red line is the UCSD serviced area,
Yeah.
which I think it is, then I don't understand
Yeah.
how it goes. Something's wrong with that
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. It shouldn't have.
This line from here to here shouldn't be there, I think.
You're talking about all this area in here by the,
Yeah,
like that should.
that's
yeah.
not service to sewers, I'm almost certain.
Yeah. That's strange because.
Okay, anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
I
We'll figure it out.
think- I think that's wrong, and boy, these are the kinds of things we gotta keep our,
Yeah.
So just to the left of this line here,
yeah. So,
you're talking this area right here.
is not serviced. That's the service boundary, actually, it's this line that's, I think, wrong. So all of the area is unserviced, but I'll have to look it up.
We'll get it sorted out.
Anyway,
Looks like
that-
that's hatched, isn't it? No, it's not.
No.
yeah, it is hatched.
Just on this side here.
This
Not-
is,
You're talking about this part in here.
yeah,
That's not.
but
has
this
no
is
fill.
hatched. Also, that's unserviceable,
Sewer not serviceable.
not serviceable by gravity.
Right.
But I don't, well, okay, so we, yeah, we gotta clarify that,
Yes.
because that should be rural residential as well, because I think we do not want to service that, even if it can serviced by their pump station, lift station scheme.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to this changes map. So, let's see. Okay, so this area, this area here is, sorry, there's not really many labels on here or anything, but this is, why am I not seeing? So, okay, so Lincoln Avenue, is that right? No, what's going on? Something's messed up with this. I don't think the streets are not lined up right, it seems. Yeah. Yeah, one of these layers got out of whack, it looks like. Because this stream should be shifted all the way over here. Okay, that's confusing. Don't look at the streets. So this area, trust me, this is south of Lincoln Avenue, and 74 should be coming right through here. This area used to be all light industrial office, and I switched it over just to be commercial. There's
So with it, again, we got to worry about this because in a way, that's not a change. 'Cause
correct.
We're now saying
Correct.
light industrial and office are commercial.
Yeah,
Just a classification, yeah.
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 change
The
of cla-
the red is now just a bigger umbrella, pulling in
Yeah.
more things. Okay, let's see what else we got. What is that? Country club. Yeah, I think that was institutional or something, but I changed that over to green space. Also, the county fairgrounds, switched that over to green space. These areas, so this is you'll recognize this as the campus mixed use zoning district now. So that's been switched over. Because in the existing plan, we had a campus mixed use. We brought that together just under the mixed use. So that's all mixed use core, and then some along west of Lincoln, and then just on the east side of Lincoln Avenue is that mixed use core.
Because of the way the zoning ordinance was amended, I think the CMU should be distinct from elsewhere. Because at 12 stories, it's completely different from any other. If you put the same category there on the plan as on South Lincoln, I know at least one person who might have a problem with that.
Right. Yeah, but the place types, as we're calling them, don't. It's not a direct correlation between a place
I
type and a
understand,
zoning
but
or
a
a
place type
zoning.
that has 12 stories buildings is not the same as a place type that has 4-story buildings.
Well, so downtown you could build very tall buildings as well.
Right, so downtown and CMU,
yeah.
I think, are one place type. I don't think
Yeah.
South Lincoln is the same.
Okay,
place
so
type.
maybe what about like the secondary mixed use, whatever
And
we're calling
We need
that?
to come
yeah.
up with a better label,
Yeah.
as you said, but
Yeah, no, that
high
definitely
activity
makes sense.
node. High activity corridor, high activity whatever.
And should we pull in the Gregory Place stuff as well into whatever the lower intensity is, or
Yeah, I
should?
think
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I agree.
Because I think it's a corridor and node of higher activity.
Yeah,
And, we're got a complete redo of the street, we've got a increased redevelopment on the east side, we've got Gregory Place.
yeah. Yep. Okay, I'm on board with that. Let's see what else here. I think there's just some random things like.
It is hard to
Right.
figure out what they are when you're
Yeah,
not
this
lined
is
up
like-
in the streets.
Oh, yeah. Well, once we get rid of institutional, it's going to be a little different. I think this is Leal. It was not labeled as institutional before, but I think now we'll probably just call that neighborhood. Just right, because schools
Well-
are allowed in neighborhoods.
Yeah, but on the annotated map, we'll annotate the
Yeah,
schools.
we'll say,
Because
yeah.
that helps
Yeah.
people orient where they are.
Yeah. Another big change, but not a big change. Like where MTD is here along Lincoln Avenue, that was the light industrial office thing. Just switching over to business as well. And then this is all
Dart.
Yeah, Dart. Okay, yep. Yeah, that's Dart. But we will need to figure out what we want to switch the institutional Brookins area over to.
Activity node, I think it's what whatever that label you came up with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Community Activity Center, something like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Or node, which is a little more neutral, but whatever, yeah.
I
And
feel like
that
a
can apply
node,
to.
node seems like smaller though, doesn't it?
I was
like, that's
gonna
a pretty
argue the
large-
opposite, But if
or-
it seems
okay.
smaller to you, then that's fine.
Whatever. Okay.
And that would also be, the Lincoln and Gregory Place would be the same thing, whatever we label it, would be the same
Okay.
kind of place.
Let's see if there's anything. Geez, I'm just gonna zoom out and see if I see anything. Sort of the undeveloped Menards type site. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of just this undeveloped residential, rather than having it painted as the lowest intensity residential. We figured having it at the mixed residential level would give more flexibility there. And, you know, if you're developing essentially new doing greenfield development, it makes more sense to do something that's more intense, because that's going to pay better for the infrastructure that you've got to lay down. So, yeah, Delcomen site, future Park District site, switch that over to green. And
We did talk to the Park District about that.
Yeah.
And I think they felt like that wasn't something that they were going to go forward with. Was that what we
yeah,
heard?
not anytime soon, but I mean, it's there.
Because it's
It might
it's
happen
outside of-
in 19 years. So
Yeah, well, it may not be developed for a long time.
yeah,
But I know who lives there, and they are my age or older, so it has been identified. It's
Yeah.
going to happen eventually. It may not be developed for a long time, but it's going to be Park District property.
yeah. Does anybody see anything else on here that you're just dying to know why it's purple?
Did the water site change too?
The water site did change. We made that into sort of the lower intensity mixed use center thing. And then also, that's a good segue into going into the development opportunities map, I think.
Just
Yeah.
while I was thinking, do we need to do anything proactively regarding this grocery store site on the north end, potentially? Or-
I don't know that we need to do that at this point, but that's a good question.
Well, will it come to us as a rezoning at some point, and would we want to have the backing of the plan to make that change? I guess. Is what
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, well, the future land use in the draft plan shows it as like the mixed use secondary. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I don't know where the
it's,
site is. That's
You
why
know,
I'm
it's institutional on here, although actually the area part of it is actually labeled for community business. So
Yeah, it's in two parcels.
yeah, hold on. I don't think wait, I did. Okay, cool. Okay, this is the existing. So the site that they're looking at, well, if they're looking at the fire station site, which I'm pretty sure they are. So our fire station's here, but we also own this land here, and the Circle K is right here. So part of it is labeled this community business already. So it's already
The rest is institutional, which we've already determined means nothing. So-
right, right. So
But-
yeah, so I think we'd be able to, even with the current plan, I think we'd be able to make a case for that being a good use there.
Well, but in the new plan,
Yeah,
we're going to be identifying this as a
mixed use, whatever. Yeah.
mixed-use activity center.
Yeah,
So that's going to be a fuzzy shape,
Mm-hmm.
which will include those sites.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be doing it parcel to parcel at this stage, but
Yeah, and we've got it called out here on this development opportunities map, so I think that gives further backing. So yeah, so this development opportunities map, I think is pretty rad.
pretty normal to me. But
I mean, it does. It looks like something that planners put together, so that's good. And I'll take this time to state this again. I'm just so impressed with the work that the students have done on all of this stuff. So it's really useful, and it's going to make the plan so much better. So thank you, all the students in the audience tonight. All right.
They're all watching. I'm
Yeah, I was
sure.
going to say, they're all watching, of course.
Yeah. So this is a development opportunities map. So, it's got these red areas are sort of corridors that have good potential. So like Washington Street, Lincoln Avenue, sort of between the whole of Urbana from 74 South, Cunningham Avenue as well, going from downtown all the way, the extent of Cunningham Avenue, let's say, because it stops right there. Okay. And then we've got sort of these orange blobs are sort of these areas that we think are good. What are we calling those? Nodes.
yeah, but we're now calling them activity centers, right?
Yeah, maybe.
And
yeah.
That's what we
Yeah.
just,
We should.
Yeah.
Be consistent.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and the ones we've been talking about, the South Lincoln is not on here, so it should be on here. And we should, in my view anyway, distinguish downtown Urbana and CMU from the others.
Yeah.
Maybe by annotations rather than colors, but I
Well-
think in terms of ones we've talked about, those are the only ones that are missing on this map at the moment.
But I feel like that Lincoln Avenue is such a narrow stretch, and it's identified here as a corridor. So do we need to also call out with an orange
Well-
blob? Because it would be,
Maybe just capture Gregory Place as a orange
okay,
thing,
yeah.
but then the corridor, I think, covers the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I was, an annotation may be sufficient if
Yeah.
we add some other annotations to this.
Well, and to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't give the students the tasks to create this map, but I got the impression that the nodes were sort of, I guess, areas to be redeveloped, or like had more redevelopment potential versus, because I feel like Gregory Place is kind of,
Yeah.
It's
No,
kinda
I
there.
think they're intended to be the activity nodes that we want to sustain. So downtown Urbana, I mean, from your point of view, it might be redevelopment, but
yeah,
from my point of view, it already exists. Philo Road already exists, but it needs
yeah,
support. The Gather corner is hot,
yeah.
so it's not that it's not there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't have a huge problem throwing the stuff around Gregory Place.
And it may not need a lot of emphasis. It could just be another annotation that identifies Gregory Place along that corridor.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that the Cunningham Activity Center has a solid line?
It doesn't on this map on the updated version, so I think they must have noticed that between when I pulled it and printed it and the map that is on my screen or on your screens now. So yeah.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I think this is really good because it gives us, it gives us sort of areas to kind of focus, because, we have a finite time and finite staff. So To have a discrete number of things is nice. And I think we'll want to call the Philo Road one. We'll probably maybe call that like Philo Road / Windsor, because it's kind of
It
Kind of that
does
whole-
go down, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it
you might
includes
even
the-
come up
it
with
in-
a different label for it.
Yeah, and it
because
includes the
Philo Road
pines
is
too. Yeah.
But they both have.
Not exactly an aspirational level at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there another name for that area? Southeast Urbana.
Create one.
Yeah.
Come on, business
We had
development
referred to
people,
it
let's
as
go.
an emerging district too.
Okay. Well, we'll figure something out. We got some clever people.
And the shapes of these are intentional. That is, they're a bit rounded and fuzzy, but they're intended like the one currently labeled Philo Road to acknowledge the pattern of development that is there that, you know, we want to encourage.
Yeah.
And note it does not even include the lower part of the Pines parcel. And that's intentional.
And I like the use of the dashed lines too, because that implies some sort of permeability.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And then, yeah, the one thing we pointed out earlier that's really useful on here too is just the calling out the sewer areas too, because we do get a lot of people that want to sort of expand to the south of Windsor Road, or we get inquiries from folks pretty frequently, and then we have to kind of explain that, yeah, if you want to spend millions of dollars to extend sewer, because they would have to come all the way down High Cross Road and then to the west to service part of that. So, yeah, I really like this map though.
We need to add some things, though, like area unserviceable by gravity. It needs to be area unserviceable sewer. I don't know, the sewer's got to be in there.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
this all makes sense to us because we're looking at this every day, but for
Yeah.
someone who,
Right, yeah, it's like don't step south of Windsor or you might float away. Okay, I think that kind of concludes pretty much all the slides of importance that I had. I did have some hidden slides I think we've got a good direction though, with how we're talking about future land use and also tying development into one. But Greensboro, North Carolina has like 2 maps where they do, I'll just show them to you since I have them here, but I like where we're going actually. But so they have their future land use map, and then they have a separate map that shows future built form. But I think we can have it all in one. And I like the language that we're using too.
Well, no,
If we're calling them, what are we calling them? Place types? Yeah. Yeah.
but
So
we're still thinking of having these two, yes or no?
I think so.
Yeah.
But the future land use will be
This will be called
will be a
place
place types, right?
this will be called
Right.
place types.
Yeah,
That'll be called place types. It'll be annotated.
right.
And then this will be just sort of a companion. I'm not sure exactly how we'll use the development opportunities, but we'll use it. It'll be useful. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think these are roughly equivalent to the two that you're showing from Greensboro, but I think for our purposes, they're better, partly because we're a much smaller,
Yeah,
I mean,
yes.
we're dealing with a very different scale of stuff, so we can be more specific and
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about how all departments are going to be using this plan, and particularly the development opportunities will be used by the economic development people, because this shows, yes, where we plan to have future growth or where we can develop, and so we can give that to folks to, it eliminates some of those areas
Yeah.
that aren't feasible, you know.
Yeah, well, and it also is in some sense aspirational, that is, the
for sure.
corridors and
Absolutely.
nodes. We're trying to do something, not just telling you where there's land available.
Absolutely.
We're not going to use this one though, right?
No, that was just for
They don't-
discussion
So I don't need
purposes.
to tell them to.
No,
Yeah.
no, they don't need to fix anything on that. Okay, well, that concludes sort of the future land use discussion, unless anybody has any final thoughts. Okay, and we did share the updates that we made to the big ideas, big moves, little moves. And if anybody wants to talk about that now, we can do that. We can also wait to give you more time to
We
go
know,
through
we know
it.
we didn't give you much
Yeah.
time, so. And you can always give us comments via email as well.
Got anything?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through it, but it may be that I can sit down with,
Yeah, if you want to meet with us, that might
I mean,
be more fruitful than.
I might identify some, I don't know, more substantive things.
Sure.
Let's see, where am I going to start here? So, some of these things I'll just identify. I think we should figure out an example of what an area plan might do, or what it might be about. Because in the context of a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, it's not clear to me what's missing.
Like why we would need to do area plans after, yeah,
Exactly
if we,
why.
yeah, if we have the
And
plan with all this.
If
yeah.
what we're actually talking about is somebody comes in with a proposal for part of the DART site, and we decide we need to think through in more detail how the whole site might develop if we have somebody wanting part of its site. That's one notion of what an area plan might be. But that's not a to-do list item, that's a sort of policy item that it's back to incremental development and the stuff we're talking about in terms of place types. So it's not clear to me that we need area plans. I know
Okay.
we've done them in the past. But something to think about.
And just for context, that was, originally it said neighborhood plans, and we took
Right,
that out, so,
which I agree with,
right.
as you may recall. And we agreed that calling them area plans was a better idea for various reasons, but that's why I'm coming back to it. So on Big Move 4, I still disagree with the downtown as opposed to an area, and I think the map we were just discussing makes clear that we actually have a focus for the economic development people as well as other people that includes things other than downtown. So we talked about it as strengthen you could say an important node or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I thought we had.
Well,
That doesn't read as I remembered us talking about it, so
And
yeah.
as another indicator, it's in two different sets of new words in two different places in your current draft, so my guess is that something did slip.
Yeah.
But both of the new words still take the attitude that isn't now, but should be. And I'm going to argue that it is one, not the only one.
And again, I think this is where we're getting into the aspirational too. You know, is that what we want? Do we want
Right, and I would
downtown
argue
to be the
it's
economic
not.
driver?
We want secondary nodes, industrial development, CMU. That's how we're going to grow the city tax base. The downtown, yes, it's part of the deal for various reasons, and it's an important part of the deal, but not the only one.
And so Lou, going back to that point, does changing the word "the" to "an"
Is
accomplish what you?
almost enough.
Does it accomplish it? Okay.
I think in combination with the map we were just talking about, which you just described as being useful for economic development
Right.
because it identifies all these other places, then we're
Okay.
sending a different message then. The walking as top priority is an improvement. I still disagree, and it's interesting that the first little move under it talks about walking and bicycles. And it's, I mean, if the notion is to rebalance among emphasis on modes of travel, then let's convey that message. And we haven't yet talked about the mobility, transportation, those maps,
Right.
which students have been working on. And I referred to some of that in terms of Bill's point.
What if we use the last sentence, which is, getting around Urbana should feel safe and convenient no matter the mode of travel?
I suggested that in July, so it's a hard battle.
Well, yeah.
That seems like a not big move. Just in terms of like we're trying to make it all like we might be able to massage that, but we're being very deliberate in making these sort of like action statements, and that's more like
So what I suggest is somehow word it more like rebalancing the emphasis in travel modes to emphasize walking.
yeah. What
That-
what
I think that's what you want to do.
what about so Greensboro they have big moves as well. It's amazing how they stole our idea from us before we had it. So they say, I think they say, I don't like how they phrase theirs, but I think theirs says becoming car optional or something like that. And I kind of like that idea where it's, because you're not forcing people to give up their cars, but you can make it, work towards making it an option. So if you're, I don't know, we could think about that, and I could share
Right.
their big idea for future, discussion as well.
Maybe flip what I was saying to de-emphasize car-only travel or something like that. Because the other thing that we're going to have to do somewhere and somehow link the big moves to is deal with the transportation stuff, where we are going to deal with bicycling, transit, and all the other stuff. So somehow, anyway, so I'm trying to go through these sort of quickly. So that's,
Yeah.
we're sort of trying to get down into the weeds maybe too quickly. And to hire a transportation planner only appears under walking. And my hope is that if we're going to hire a transportation planner, that they are not only going to deal with walking. But we can talk about that when we're going through nitty-gritty of how stuff. Then under Big Move 7, this is where there's confusion of incremental, infill, and redevelopment. So infill is putting something where there's nothing, but within current development areas. Redevelopment is doing something where something has already been developed before. So those are actually two potentially different things. And incremental can be at any size chunk and may have nothing to do with infill in the narrow sense or redevelopment. So we can talk about all three of them in that one place, but there's some places where the words are the wrong words. Where
Okay.
we mean redevelopment when we say incremental, et cetera. And anyway, I can talk about that in detail with you later.
Okay.
And then in a couple of places in Big Move 8 and 9, there's sort of ambiguity about some things that maybe should be put under the objectives, or maybe should be in both places because there's a sort of a subtle distinction between what's an objective and what's something to do. But I've identified some, some matches that we might play with. And related to that, I think that we should identify metrics with the objectives, not just with the to-do list. Because the to-do list, as it now is reorganized, the metrics are basically, have we done it? But the objectives are what we're trying to accomplish. And you can do something intended to accomplish something without accomplishing it. And you can measure whether you've accomplished your objective independent of whether you can do to-do list. And I think some of the metrics are actually there, but I think they'll be stronger if they're associated with the objectives rather than the to-do list.
Okay.
And I think that will also help reduce some of the places where there's 20 metrics that, the base rate observation from the people who study the use of metrics is if you have too many, you don't get any of them done. So I think we should narrow some of them down. And then the only other thing that comes into this is the mobility transportation stuff that I was talking about before. Otherwise, I think the pieces are sort of there.
Okay.
And this redraft gets close to being able to imagine how we link two additional sections after this on the land use and the mobility stuff.
I concur with Lou's last point, to link the metrics with the objectives rather than the little moves. But it implies that we're actually measuring important stuff. Are we, if we're talking about financial footing, I would expect to see the financial picture now and the financial picture down the line.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
As I say, I may be forgetting. I think
we should. Oh, somebody just turned my mic on. So, yeah, I think we should because that's
Yeah.
an important part of what's driving this.
Yeah.
This isn't just about the way our city feels to people, even though that's important. It's sustainability from a financial perspective is huge.
I know
Yeah,
we make mention of, within resources, accomplishing whatever that task was within the resources we have, but we don't specifically talk about financial metrics.
So I didn't see it needing metrics. And, I mean, I can't believe I missed this. We need to make sure there's an objective where that metric belongs, and that metric, and my guess is there's more than one. I don't know whether it's actually tax base. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tax base relative to something else, either as one measure or two measures. But, and what Dustin found makes exactly the point about metrics about the to-do list versus metrics about the objectives. Because we could have wonderful success on the to-do list attracting dollars from new businesses, and the tax base could still go down. So we need
Project that's potentially happening with this grocery store, right? So if
Yeah.
there was a rezoning associated with that grocery store project, how would we use what is in here currently to demonstrate that rational basis? Would we,
Sorry, I'm laughing because there's a specific little move that's like put a grocery store in Northwest Urbana.
Yes.
But
Okay.
And,
so
then,
that's-
and then
that's
there's
a-
another one that
yeah.
addresses food deserts everywhere in the
but,
city.
Yeah.
so, and this is, Lou mentioned this, but in some cases, are we just citing the objectives in the big ideas, or, because sometimes there's things in the little moves that also seem to support, but that could also mean that they're not in the right place, that maybe they should be objectives underneath a little move, or
Do you have an
both
example
places.
that would help
Yeah,
us?
I mean, not associated with my grocery store example, but let's say that someone wanted to rezone a property to make a quadplex or something like that. So one of the ways to support that might be in big move number 1. There's a line that says, with big move, little move 1.8, allow a variety of housing types in every neighborhood at scales appropriate to each neighborhood. So to me, that's something that's more of an objective or a policy kind of
Yeah.
statement, as opposed to, and it would support,
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been something that would have been useful to have in the case of the duplex text amendment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that's the first one I've got noted on my list.
As a policy.
This should be
Yeah.
an objective. There's another reason it should be an objective, and that is we have to be careful that it doesn't actually contradict our place types. Because it says all, and we're not allowing all in all our place types. But it's clearly what it needs to be stated in a way that's an objective, so we can use it as Dustin is
Yeah.
describing. But yeah, I mean, it's an example of one of the ones I've got in here on my list of details that,
When I,
One of the things I
what
was
is-
gonna suggest, if there is the potential to reference things from both the big ideas and the big moves, is that we add a B to the objectives, so B 1.1, B 1.2, whatever, and then the little moves be L 1.1,
Yeah.
L, something like
Yeah.
that. So if we get to the point where we need to reference something that's in a little move that seems to provide support for whatever it is that we're trying to do, then we can do something like that, and there's no
Yeah.
confusion between those two. But I think there are other examples besides that one, but that's the one that has actually stuck out to me from
think if we
day
go
one
back-
when I first looked at this.
I think if we go back and take what you've said about tying them to objectives, I think that'll help us sort through those maybe a little better.
Yeah.
One of the things that Kevin talked about, which I thought was a practical use, when you talk about how Plan Commission is going to use it or how a planner is going to use it, and we made the graphic that shows how everybody's going to use it, but from a practical standpoint, Kevin said, and he doesn't even know that made an impression on me probably, but he said, I would probably print out this section right here and have that, and that's what I would use as reference. It's a quick guide that everything's in this section, but we have to make sure that it, of course, accomplishes what we want. But I think that's, this section is really what a planner or the Plan Commission would
what
keep.
section are you talking about?
I'm
Just
talking-
this
this
big,
whole
you know.
group here,
yeah.
talking about the big moves, the big ideas, the objectives are all right here concisely, hopefully, when we get it finalized, that's something that, it's a quick reference guide, just that one section. I mean, you're going to use the whole plan, of course, with the maps, et cetera, but that's a kind of a quick reference guide, I think.
But it's also the complete reference guide because we don't have anything else at the moment, right?
Concise, and that's
Yeah.
what our intention was from the beginning, is to have something concise that,
Yeah, but
As a
I
whole.
guess what I'm saying is, if we need other criteria or there
Yeah.
are things that we need for backing, there's not something else, some
No,
other
it
section of
needs-
this
it needs to
plan
be
where
in here.
they're going
That's
to be.
correct.
They're going to be in these
that's
sections.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not finished yet, but yes, the goal is that, yes, everything would be in this one section.
I have a,
And then my other, oh, go ahead.
no, you go.
I mean, this has been mentioned already, but there are just too many metrics in some of these sections. And some of them are not clear, like what it is, why they're in a particular section and what they're measuring. And it may be just because more information wasn't copied from the table, but for example, big move number 4, which is about strengthening downtown. There's a metric called 4.6.1 number of gaps in the network. I don't know what network that is.
oh yeah, sidewalk network, I think.
What is it in Big
Uh,
Move 4?
4.6.1.
I assumed it was related to sidewalks, but is it sidewalks throughout the city, sidewalks in downtown?
That shouldn't even be there. Yeah, it shouldn't.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
probably
that's-
shouldn't be there,
that's-
but
that's shouldn't be there at all. Because that goes back to the walkability and sidewalks.
Or Chenchi just mentioned that seems to be linked to Little Move 4.6, which is
Yeah.
about connecting the city's ped bike infrastructure with downtown. So
yeah,
just,
It needs to be more
yeah,
explicit.
it needs to be
then.
more
Yeah,
clear, having success to achieve the goals and the objectives. I think there needs to be some thought put into the feasibility of the metrics being able to be updated and to be assessed on a regular basis. And I mean, it would be better to have a smaller set of metrics that staff can do on a regular basis and that we can keep track of than it is to have a really, really exhaustive list that, maybe gets done the first year and then just kind of falls off because there's not enough time to commit to it or something like
Yeah,
that. So
I
think we
agree.
need to weigh those
You're
things.
correct. I mean, the value is in the implementation of the metrics.
Right.
And,
Well, it's
in
also the communication. I mean, I think we need to think through not just that we're gonna have these measures and these metrics measuring, implementation, or movement, but what are we gonna do with it, right? So who does this get shared with? How does this become part of the decision-making process of not just Plan Commission, but the rest of the city?
And I think by giving you a chunk, you don't see that other chunk that's at the end about tracking and evaluating. Not that I think it answers exactly what you're talking about, but that other section does explain how we're going to do it, how we're going to communicate, et cetera. But I think we can still expand upon it just based on what you're sharing now.
Yeah, I do remember that, but
Yeah,
just
it needs to be expanded upon.
keeping that in mind in light of how many metrics, the ease of doing, finding all this information on a regular basis. Establishing baselines. I don't think there's always something about establishing baselines. I mean, what we're really interested in a lot of these things are change over time, not just
Yeah.
a snapshot of something at a particular point in time. So
And I think that was in reference to exactly what you're saying. We may not have said it as well as you just did, it's to establish a baseline now where we are so that you can show the progression.
yeah.
Because it's all about that, like you said.
So I will go check the reference book. There's a sort of standard reference on doing metrics for plans. My recollection is that the advice is on the order of 10, not on the order of 100. And we're on the order of 100.
yeah,
And if you think about what would you really want to communicate? Like tax base, maybe affordable housing, some measure of affordable housing. I mean, you can check off your to-do lists, that's fine.
yeah,
That's a sort of a staff function and a staff accountability function. But in terms of measuring the aspirations of what we're trying to accomplish, focusing on 10 and realizing what they are,
There's four big ideas, like a couple metrics for each big idea. That seems
Well,
doable
I think,
to
Lou,
me.
you made a good distinction, is the difference between a staff person being on top of it and doing their job that's going to accomplish goals versus using
The
metrics
goals
for
themselves.
for the plan. I think that's a good distinction.
Our job here is to put together the best, help you put together the best comprehensive plan that you can. So I apologize for jumping ahead. But what's going to be the impact of this comprehensive plan on the zoning ordinance? Do we expect piecemeal changes? I mean, we expect to have a zoning ordinance. We expect to have zones, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So, you know, we've written into the plan that, you know, the long-term thing is to rewrite the zoning ordinance. Like that's the big target that's out there. But then we also put in there that we'll be making incremental changes between now and then, because that, you know, that might take a few years to rewrite the ordinance to match up with the plan. And we know, I mean, we have a list. I think last time I checked, we had over 70, like anything from like really small, just like nitpicky changes to more substantial stuff that we would like to see changed. And that's just really to even align with our current plan. But we'll be proposing sort of incremental, maybe like low-hanging fruit type of things between, you know, now and when we would rewrite the ordinance.
There are also grants for zoning reform. I was on a webinar.
Are there now?
Yes, and I think HUD, for one, puts out grants, and they ask for you to demonstrate that you have started to make your own progress, which, like the CMU rezoning would be a perfect example of, you know, having done something like that, you know, internal by staff. So, yeah, I can't remember. This is like a CM credit thing I did.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember where it
Yeah.
was, but if I can find it, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that would
But
be
I
great.
know HUD was one of the providers of these grants.
We can search for it as well, but yeah, that's
I'll have to go back and look
awesome.
at my CM credits and see where it came from. Anything else?
well, this was extremely
Yeah,
helpful.
this has been great.
Great discussion.
Next steps?
Next steps, I mean, we'll go back, make some changes to this section again, based on your comments here. We'll continue working with you and the students to sort of refine things. I think I had some other notes written down for sort of next.
I think one of the things that we had wanted to see or get some sense of was kind of like an outline of, I mean, we know, you know, we know what this section looks like. This is the second time we've looked at it, but
Yeah.
how do some of these other things start to fit into the map? Start the maps. How do these other maps,
Yeah.
a lot of these are maps, how do they start to fit into the plan, and what other content is needed to sort of frame this information? I think that's something
Yeah.
that we're curious about too, because it seems
Can
like
you,
these
can
are
you
really.
state the last part again? The second part? You mentioned how the plans fit in, and then,
Yeah, well, I imagine there's content that we need to create that frames how these fit into the plan, and describes how they're used and how they relate to some of these other things. I mean, you know, I think the big ideas and big moves are sort of shot through all of these different maps and graphics that have been made, but I think there needs to be some explicit text that
Yeah.
sort of makes those linkages between these two things, so it doesn't just seem like we have, you know, the big ideas, big moves, and then, oh, and here's a bunch of graphics.
Right.
Have
Right,
fun, right?
right. Well, in that section, I know that we did have an introduction but we need to elaborate just on what we've heard tonight.
Okay. We'll give that some thought.
And now it's not called future land use, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Place types.
Place types. That's much better because I had an issue, like future land use just seems very narrow of a term, I think.
Yeah. Anything else?
And feel free, if you've had time to just digest things, shoot us your thoughts via email. We'd be glad to. Some things come to mind after you had discussion like this, so we would appreciate it. Great.
So do we expect another study session on mobility stuff? Do we,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
sort of,
So I
iterations
just I
here?
just got the layers today, loaded them up. I started looking at them. I'm gonna go through. So essentially, sorry to give everybody more background here. So one of the student groups is looking at basically our entire network of connectivity. So the layer I got today was all street layers. So we're using a guide from the NACTO. It's National Association of City Transportation Officials. They make really good guides for like street design and bikeways and things like that. So they're using the NACTO Urban Street Design Guide, something like that, to basically to classify every street in Urbana based on, most of it's going to be based on sort of how they function now, but there's also some ability, since we're looking to the future, to tweak some of the classifications, I think. So a good one that I noticed today was like Illinois Street down here. Right now it's a 4-lane street. We're going to be redoing it in the next couple of years. But I think just the basic thing that it's classified as is something that's maybe a little more high-speed type street than we'd really like to see it be. So I'll probably be suggesting we change the classification of that to be something lower speed and more, more neighborhood scaled, as opposed to being a 4-lane boulevard like it is right now. So I'm going to go through that layer and then sort of make some tweaks, and then once we have that, we'll be able to discuss it. And since we have a lot of streets in the town, I'll curate what we want to talk about when we pull that map up. So that will be forthcoming,
maybe?
hopefully soon. Yeah,
2 weeks,
maybe 2
maybe,
weeks.
not.
Maybe there's a holiday in here too, so
Right, well, I understand.
Yeah.
It's real.
and I get to go back to committee right after the holiday, so for the duplex text amendment thing. So prepping for that too.
Yeah, okay.
And the students are off next week, yeah.
Yeah, but while the students are off, if I can find some time, I'll get my changes made so I can share them with them, and then we can roll with that.
Sounds good. Anything else? All right. With that, we are adjourned
Yeah,
at
thanks.
9:24.